So this is our team here that's on the front of the overview of the draft laws. Of course, we have a large team across Canada for First Peoples Law, but Carrie Young is not able to be with us today. She's residing in Hudson, not too far, and works in the Ottawa office, but she's out in Saskatchewan trying to finish up a very large, exciting settlement today. So we're all hoping for her and all her hard work, and she couldn't be in two places at once, but she wanted to be here. Saber, I'll let her introduce herself, but she's a really important part of the team, and I'm so glad that she could make it today. Go ahead, Saber.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Saber Pictou-Lee, and I'm Mi'kmaq from a small community in northeastern New Brunswick called Eel River Bar First Nation. I'm a lawyer with First Peoples Law. I've been with this file for about 2 years now. It's been a real honor for doing this work, and I'm looking forward to this presentation and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we're lucky to have Saber here. She brings a lot of knowledge, research capacity. She's owned her own company for years, and just also helping us connect with the very important next generation. Saber really likes working with youth, so we've been happy to get her out to a couple of different sessions and creating ethical spaces. So I think it's been a nice, definitely nice addition to our team. For my part, my name is Cynthia Westaway, and I've been working in this area for 30 years now, so I'm getting kind of long in the tooth. But I've been doing it across Canada, and I started out working in some human rights and at the Supreme Court and at the federal court, and then moved into kind of a litigation practice over 10, 15 years, as well as a negotiation practice. So I try to bring what I learn across the country, what the elders have taught me in various situations in community, what various judges and mentors have taught me over the years. And so really excited. I'm really excited about this project. I think it's a very important start, and I really hope that people will support it and galvanize together. Okay. So just we're going to go through the overview, the purpose of these laws. We're going to talk about an ethics code because we were asked by Chief and Council, how do we inspire the future? How do we get people really believing in the health, safety, and wellness of their leadership, of their community? And so we recommended the ethics code, which had already been started. And so there was already some great work done, and we just kind of pulled that together. We heard that there were some questions about land safety and about waters and trees and shorelines. So it made sense to have those that are not here in the community for a legal purpose or for a proper purpose to be subject to a trespass law. We know there's been flooding. We know that in the north we've had fires. We know that there are emergencies that really, really hit First Nations harder than any of the surrounding communities. So the emergencies measures law became a priority, as well as the land protection law. At the end of the presentation of those laws, we'll talk about getting registered for those who want to use One Feather, which is a company that can help us do surveys or votes or however you want to move your laws forward. These are the early stages of how to develop processes, and then we'll have a time for questions. Do this every time it's time to flip. Next slide. So again, the laws are to assure accountability, safety, responsible governance. They're very high level laws. They're not getting into the weeds. They're creating a structure that can be interpreted according to the values of the community. So they're very high level visionary laws that we were asked to do first. And they are not founded on any one authority. They're founded on the broad authorities that the community has. Certainly the inherent rights, the long customs and inherent traditions and rights of the MCK and the Kanesatake people are the most important authority for any laws that you create. You've always had laws. These are not new. You've always had laws. You still have laws. This is just putting them into a form that they are recognizable by other jurisdictions. So a provincial jurisdiction or a federal jurisdiction or a neighboring First Nation jurisdiction. So there's nothing, we're not creating your laws. We're codifying or putting them into a form that they are recognizable. You also have, of course, very important Canadian constitutionally recognized rights under Section 35 and Section 25, and Section 52 of the Constitution says these are the highest laws of the land, the supreme laws. So your Section 35 rights to hunt, fish, trap, gather, ceremony, all of your governance rights as a nation, those are all protected under against Canadian interference under Section 35 of the Constitution. So that's another foundation for these laws. We've also used as a foundation the international laws of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and then their implementation in Canada as well. So again, these are high-level norms, high-level international principles that are reflective of the way that your customs and laws have always been in these territories since time immemorial. You also have a governance act and a code that was passed, sometimes called, a bill, sometimes it's called KILGA, but we call it a governance act because it's an act that gives you specific authority that is beyond the Indian Act that other First Nations have. But it doesn't take away your Indian Act rights. You also have those rights under the Indian Act that creates a governing council, that creates a structure and leadership. So of those 5 boxes that are your legal foundations, you have the jurisdiction that you want to exercise under all of those boxes. Okay, that's an important slide. And Saber, you'll wave at me if you've got something that you want to add.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Same thing with you, Chief Brandt, or anybody else. So then the Code of Ethics, the first one that we can present, and I think these have all, if I'm not mistaken, been shared already. So you can find, maybe you can say where they're shared, Saber, or what's going on with the laws themselves.
Yes, they're posted on the website. I believe maybe Chief Brandt, we could drop the link to the laws on the website too, so everyone's able to access them publicly and download them and review them. Right now they're available in English.
Okay, good. Yeah, so those are, there's nothing secret about them, but I didn't really want to take you word by word through so that I put you to sleep, because they're very technical. They're just a tool to increase stability. So the Code of Ethics, the main goals are to promote the ethical leadership and accountability, and not because anything's unethical about your leadership, but in the past we've seen examples across Canada where there weren't any codes to follow. We've also seen that ethical codes and leadership can really inspire the next generation to want to join leadership, to want to become part of the solution. It also sets an example for our children. So those are really important goals, I think, to inspire new leaders, to create a culture of future wellness, of safety, of a vision that people have, and to be an example for the next generation. So this is an exemplary code. It'll apply to all elected council members. It talks about conflicts of interest. Now, we know we're in a small community. We know that people are still going to be related by cousins, sometimes by neighboring nations, sometimes, as close as family members. So the conflict of interest provisions are clear that if you have a personal financial benefit, or your immediate family has a personal or financial benefit, then you would declare a conflict of interest. And having that written down just gives everybody the same rules to follow. So we talk about immediate spouses, children, parents, and siblings. Or if you have a significant financial interest, of course, you'd want to declare that conflict and not be involved in that particular matter. You have a number of chiefs that you elect so that your governments can still work. It's not like you have 2 people. You have a nice broad team. You have a good portfolios with your technicians. So this can work, certainly, this code for MCK. So just generally, the council members have to represent the nation with integrity and unity. So they're trying to work collaboratively. We've seen that with this council. We've seen challenges in the past where people haven't worked collaboratively. But as long as everyone's making that effort and moving in that direction, that's what this code requires. It requires engagement with the community, what we're doing today, giving people an opportunity to read what the council's doing, to understand what the code of ethics would be. That's really important. Community sharing. Attend meetings. Maybe you want to vote on laws. Maybe you want to do a survey. Maybe you want to just give your input, but always to vote in the best interest. So people can have different views. They can see things black when someone else sees it white. But if you're seeing that black or that white in your vision of the best interests of the community, you're following the code. And we can have a discussion, a very, very beneficial discussion on the differences of views, because nothing is simple, of course. And then the lead portfolios are going to be based on experience and skills. So it's not you're my favorite, housing person, therefore you're going to have this portfolio. You know something about housing. You have some skills. You're a good communicator. You're a digger. You're a researcher. You're going to find out. Those are the skills that council will be looking for in the assignment of portfolios. And then they're going to be looking for communication skills. Who's providing quarterly reports back and who's updating the community? Want to do this one, Saber?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things. That one, if you have opened up the Code of Ethics, the Word document from the website, right now we're looking at, I believe, section 4, which is the roles and responsibilities. There's 17 different provisions under this section. It's summarized here in this presentation, but it's really about providing some structure and accountability for current and future council members that are elected, and then therefore there's some continuity and some expectations that both community and elected leaders can expect.
Okay, the next one too. On the standards of conduct, so the council members have to act honestly, respectfully, professionally, stay away from any harassment or discriminatory practices, of course. It's basically about professionalism in the public and in social media. Of course, we don't really want our leaders taking a direction that we wouldn't be proud of. And so following all the laws, the policies, making sure that they're professional and respectful on social media and in their roles are the standards that are required by this code. Conflict of interest, we've talked about that. Make all efforts to avoid situations where personal interest interferes with duties. Disclose immediately. Your conduct and actions have to promote transparency and fairness. Disclosure and employment rules. So if you have financial interests, you write an affidavit. That sounds scary, but it's just a piece of paper that says these are my interests and I disclose them. I have a family business. We're running the solar farm. Therefore, I'm not going to make a decision on whether we fund this solar farm instead of the wind farm, things like that. Employment by MCK, if you're going to be an employee, how does that relationship work? There should be discussions about that. They have to be based on fair qualifications and your skills that we already talked about. There'll be open competitions. They'll be advertised. And they're going to ask people to try to refrain from any contractual or business relationships that would have interests that were previously handled by the council. So again, it's really fairness, common sense, professionalism that's going to be required. And you can't, of course, disclose personal and confidential information. Community gets consulted and information gets shared to community. But that doesn't mean that one piece of information that went to a meeting for a decision gets haphazardly shared or forwarded, or that would be a breach of the professionalism of the council. Decisions have to be made based on good information, and then the decisions that are made and the summary of the information that they were made on gets shared with the community. It's a professional way to handle that communication. So you don't disclose information without authorization if you're part of the council, part of the chief's council, and you don't abuse any access that you may have to the resources or the property of the council. Reporting and enforcement of the code. If there are concerns, it goes to an ethics commission chair, an independent body that's been set up. So this is very exciting to have that already set up. Council would review the alleged breaches. If someone has a question, they could allege that there's a concern. And if there's a breach, they can apply penalties up to $5,000 in a fine, or if necessary, or the removal from office under the custom electoral code. Most of the time, if someone doesn't realize that they're making a breach and it gets disclosed, there's a discussion, the independent ethics commissioner, points it out. There's a requirement to discuss and understand, and there's kind of like a 2 or 3 strikes and you're out kind of approach. However, if there's no understanding, if there's no learning, if there's no respect for the code, then that person can be removed. Again, just a recap of the responsibilities for council: transparent, ethical, disclose your conflicts of interest, report honestly to the community, and respect confidentiality and uphold the law. Anything, Saber, to add there?
No, I think that sums it up nicely. My only other point too is that the Independent Ethics Commission is a body derived from the code that's already been adopted in kanesatake. So we were able to have that set up, and it's a great independent mechanism to be able to uphold this specific code of ethics.
And it includes people who are legally trained, people who have a lot of experience, people who are independent. So it's not my brother making a decision on me. It's an outside independent expert who's making a collective decision for all of us in the best interest of the community. That's their goal. So it is exciting to have that in place finally. So maybe before we go on to the trespass law, I'll ask those that are joining us today. Do you have any burning questions on the ethics code that you'd like us to answer right away? I think your mics might be muted, but maybe if we could unmute, if they have any questions, they could raise a hand.
Or if you'd like to be anonymous, I think you can comment in the chat, and I'm happy to read that out.
I think somebody was going to ask something.
No, I was just going to say I don't have any question at this time.
Pretty clear? Okay, good. That we did our job.
Yeah. The only, I think I should have asked that at the beginning. I think that's one of the concern that will they be translated in French?
Oh, that's a really good question. We work in French and we have some Francophone lawyers in our office. So yes, we could definitely help with that. Chief Brandt, do you have a comment on that or a timeline?
We can definitely get it translated in French. It shouldn't be difficult. It's just I think it's just making the time to assign that to somebody. It's just oversight right now.
Well, we barely got them done in English, but yes, absolutely. Je suis très content de le faire en français. Il faut le faire. So I think we'll get.
I think to reach our French-speaking committee members, it's very important that these things are translated in French.
Okay,
and I
good.
saw also in Gagnac Guerraga, but yeah, so.
Yeah, that we don't have any expertise, but maybe that's the thing that we should talk about at our next meeting, Saber, with the council. How do we make sure we get translated into the traditional language as well? But we can go ahead and work on the French right away.
Yeah, in Gagnac we have some people that are able to deal with technical stuff right now. So we just have to assign it and make sure we have funds to pay for the translation. That's all.
And that may be something we can raise with Canada at our negotiation table for the table that we have set up once this election is done. I think that's something that Canada should support financially as well. So we'll go after that. That's a really, really good comment. Thank you so much. Anything else? Okay. So let's jump into the next one, which is the trespass.
I do have a question, because right now, how many are you, what's the percentage of people you're trying to reach right now in regards to these laws?
So
If you can
what
answer that.
yeah, that's a good question. I think we want to make sure that everybody has access. That's why I think that we created the website and created the tools to get it out. It's the first time that we're doing this kind of presentation, this kind of passing of laws. So we don't already have everybody's email address and a way to pump it out. Like usually we get everybody signed up and then we pump out the information, we get information back, and we go that way. Because the community has had some challenges that have been difficult in the last few years, we don't have ready access to all of that information. So the best we can do is use technology, get it out in a special platform that we've set up with One Feather, a company that sets up that sharing platform. Hire communications talent. So the First Nation hired that for the first time to get a communications expert online, create the tools, and then create this presentation and have it recorded. So I don't know how many people will actually come or actually have questions, but we will hope that most people will at least follow along. Even if they don't have questions, they'll look and they'll understand and they'll make that request. In many First Nations, the chief and council share that information and they just pass the laws. That's their job. That's what they're elected to do. But because we haven't done a lot of laws here in this First Nation, they wanted to do a big communication first and see what people want to do. If people come back and are very enthusiastic and want to hold a whole vote, we can. Normally, it's more just sharing the information and then putting the laws in place. So we'll see. I know it's a long answer, but we really don't know the answer yet. All we can do is create the avenue, create the information, share the tools, and then see how interested people are in moving forward.
I do just want to add one piece there, Cynthia, that this is the first draft of the laws, that we are looking to get as much feedback on as possible, and then we'll make those changes or amendments or additions as needed, and then we will reshare the final draft when that's ready, when there has been, a good amount of feedback put into it.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, these laws are not terribly complex. They're laws that are in place in many nations across Canada, in many communities, and in many provinces even. So the next law that we're going to look at, the trespass law, is a common law that's been in place for 300-400 years in English common law, and it's part of the droit civil, and so it's just recodified as an MCK law. We go to the next slide, Saber. There we go. So trespass law regulates land access and protects community health and safety. And the next slide, it occurs when a person comes into the land after being told not to. So it's not just people who are coming through or who have been invited. It occurs when a person, I think I forgot a page. Sorry, okay, we'll go back. Key definitions. So kanesatake land is Mohawk territory, including your interim land base. A member is someone who's on your list and it doesn't apply to them. They're not trespassing. A non-member, they're not recognized as a member in this law, the definitions that are in this law. An occupier is someone who legally controls the premise because they're occupying it. And the authorized person is authorized to enforce the law. That can be a peace officer, that could be anybody that we designate to enforce the law. And it also, of course, includes police and other safety officers. So now to the page that I was at by mistake.
Yeah. The substance.
Yeah, the substance. So when someone enters or stays in the law, if they're told not to, they could be trespassing. If they're given a direction to leave, during COVID, we gave people written directions not to come onto the property, not to come in or to leave because of health and safety issues. If they refuse, they would be trespassing. If they are removed and then they re-enter, they could be trespassing. Or if they're engaging in prohibited activity without permission. So if they come with a big bulldozer and knock down all the trees without any permits or any permissions or anything like that, that's a trespasser as well. Usually when someone does something like that, they're breaching a couple different laws. Usually they don't have a permit, or they haven't provided notice, and they're trespassing, and maybe they're damaging property. So there's a fine or there's something owed for those breaches as well. So the next slide, a person is not guilty of trespass if they have permission or if they're invited by MCK and the occupier of the property, or if they acted under lawful authority, they were there because they were searching for someone who was lost, or they had some kind of other authority to be there. Comment? There'll be lots of notice.
I do. I have a
Go ahead.
question. When you're talking
Yeah.
about the occupier,
Yeah,
can you go back to the other slide?
yeah, the
Okay.
occupier.
What do you mean by that? The person that owns the land?
Yeah,
Or-
sometimes it's a person that owns the land, or someone who is managing their business or their store, an apartment building. They've purchased a lot and they're going to build on it, but they haven't built on it yet. They can be the occupier of the land. Another question?
So when you're talking about occupier, even if it's not their, well, I'm not going to beat around the bush there. We have a lot of people from our community that have just taken land, right? Just built, put up buildings, erected buildings, and whatever. Are those, are they considered occupier? That's what I try to.
So that's a question. So usually the law, that's why it would have been nice to have laws a lot sooner, but at least if we have them now, laws apply forward. So you'll have to talk about that. That's one thing that I'm glad you're raising. What happens if someone built and never had any permissions, never got a permit? The challenge is maybe they should have known. Maybe there were laws in place that they should have respected, that they didn't have the right to do that under the Indian Act or under other laws that are already in place. But now it will be very clear, because now if you have a trespass law that the community passes, that means that we are giving everybody notice that you do not just go and put up a building. You have to have permission of the owner of that land. You have to have permission of the community leadership who's elected to make those kinds of decisions and to have a permitting body in their land's management plan. So there would have to be permission, permitting, and respect for the laws going forward. As soon as this is passed, then it would apply going forward. So then if they didn't have permission of the community and they didn't have permission of whoever occupied that land, then they would be trespassing and could be fined or could be charged for that. In order to give people notice, we want to have these laws in place. We want to let everybody to know about them. We want everybody to understand them. We want to have signs that are visible and legible in normal light, so posted at access points. They can be text or symbols, but we have to give notice and make sure people know about this and have a fair chance to follow it.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, for example, entering kanesatake land. So you would want the sign that says, welcome to kanesatake, or you're entering kanesatake, and then the sign at the end that's saying you're exiting. And so then notice is given that you're entering into MCK land or kanesatake territory, and therefore the trespass law applies between those two notice signs.
Why don't you do the next one too, Saber?
Sure. So this one is Section 6 of the Trespass Law, excuse me, and it really defines what an authorized person can do. So here, if you have somebody entering into kanesatake lands, the authorized person or the peacekeeper can ask for the name and the address of that person. If they're refusing to provide the information, so for example, the peace officer came to your auntie's house because you called and said there was somebody wandering on their property. The peace officer asked for their name and address. They refused to provide that information. Then it could possibly be an offense under the Trespass Act. If they've been asked to leave after refusing, so they did not disclose their name and address, the peace officer then asked them to leave the premise, and then they refused to leave, that could also be a second offense under the Trespass Act. So these are some things around trespasser identification. They're required to provide their name and address.
That was a good question in the chat. Someone asked, what if you're a member, but you don't actually have an address on the reserve? You would be welcome. If you're a member on the reserve, then you're welcome to be on the reserve. If you did something, though, that was prohibited, so if there was a law against putting Roundup or some kind of poison, in the gully or in the ditches or something, and you were doing something like that, then you could be found to be illegally putting things into the environment as well as trespassing, because you would have to have been given notice that that's not an allowable substance here on our territory. We don't want our moose and our animals eating Roundup and poison. So you would be informed of that, and that would turn you into someone who had breached the law and could possibly be a trespasser, even though you're a member. So if we go back to the very beginning in that slide, it's if you have permission and you're a member, you're not trespassing. If you don't have permission, it's clear you've had notice you don't have permission, and you're engaging in a prohibited activity, something that's not legal, then you could be a trespasser. Chief Brandt?
Yeah. How do these, okay, so you'd mentioned the laws act forward. How does that interact with previously existing, say, like our land code has stipulations that any works to be done on communal property is to go through certain processes and everything like that. Do the stipulations in this law override this, or how do they interact together?
Yeah, good question. The courts always interpret things to work harmoniously or together. So if you've already got laws and codes on how certain things have to happen, this trespass law will be interpreted in light of that existing law. So the court will look at that and say, not only do you have notice now that you've done something that's prohibited, but you always should have known that because that other stipulation was already in place. So they'll interpret them together. One won't override the other. The only thing that overrides a law is a constitutional right or a Section 35, your Aboriginal rights. That can override a statute, and that can override a law that you've written, because it's the supreme law of the land, as they say. It's a higher level of Indigenous right. But everything else is interpreted together, and they have to work harmoniously. Okay. Go to enforcement. So it's what we call in law strict liability offense. You can invoke a penalty up to $5,000. It's not a lot of money, but it's significant. Imprisonment for not respecting these important laws up to 2 years, less a day. So it could be less. If you've got a first-time offender and you want to, somebody young, and you want to impose 3 months, 6 months, you can. But it can go up to 2 years. And there can also be community service restitution for someone who needs to, provide some community education or community service instead. So it's very flexible. But each day of the offense, if they don't stop, it's can be a new charge, and it can be heard by the Court of Quebec or a Justice of Peace, or if when we establish your own courts, you can hear it through your own MCK court. So in summary, it's about safe land and access. There has to be a clear process for enforcement, and it's all about community safety as a priority. Any other questions that came to mind on the trespass? Those few who are here in person?
Oh, in person, okay.
Or not in person, but on the online?
Yeah. We also had a law that was passed for environment. Would that
You mean
also
the
apply?
dumping law? The anti-dumping law?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think that was just a moratorium, unfortunately.
Mm.
Really? I thought it was people voted on those laws. I remember
Yeah,
attending workshops. We voted on them when we went to vote. I don't remember which election,
I think
but
it was 2016 or so.
yeah. So you're
Mhm.
still saying it's because there were laws as far as I know. We voted for them. So anyways, I don't know if you were aware of that, Cynthia. So I don't maybe check
Mhm.
into that or.
Yeah, we definitely want to look into that. I think we've seen the moratorium, but Saber, let's follow up and look again and see.
Mhm.
I'm sure they'll be interpreted harmoniously, but it may
Yeah.
be that they didn't have a lawmaking process in place at the time, so it was more of a moratorium. And the trouble is the Governance Act that you have kind of requires you to have a clear process so people know what to expect. It's flexible. It doesn't have to be a vote all the time. It can be just information and workshops and things like that. But now you've got a lawmaking process. So we should go back and look at those 2016 laws. I think we've got most of the main concepts in here, but
Mhm.
that's good advice. We'll go back and look at it again. Okay. The next one to talk about is the emergency measures law. Again, these are things that are emergencies. They don't happen every day. When they do happen, you have to have something in place. So there are definitions in here that talk about how to protect the community, how to give the leadership guidance on what they should be doing whenever these kind of crazy things happen. So they define disaster, an urgent or critical condition that hurts the damages the property or the people, the safety and the health of the people. It's present or imminent. It's not like I decided it's emergency, but nobody else thinks it is. Everybody has to think, oh, this is a present danger, an imminent situation, and it requires action to stop the damage of land or the damage of people, like a fire, like a flood, like a big COVID, even some of those kinds of pandemics, as well as under the definition, you have to have impact on the physical or social well-being of the community. And an authorized person who is the one who is encouraged in this law to act, to take care of the people, is a person authorized to exercise any power or role of leadership to perform a limited duty during the emergency. Anything to add to that, Saber? Do you want to do that and then maybe do the next one?
Sure. Yeah. Just want to emphasize the importance of having these key definitions or key terms defined in the law is to ensure that if there is a need to declare an emergency or a need to declare an emergency measure, there's some parameters around what an emergency or disaster is. So, like Cynthia said, it's not just one person saying this is an emergency and therefore we're declaring an emergency. But rather there are definitions. It has to be very urgent. It has to be a critical situation that needs to be responded to, or it has to be, imminent and presenting really a threat to the harm or damage of the land or the damage to safety, health, or welfare of members. So jumping on over here, like I had noted, MCK may declare a state of emergency if there is a disaster or emergency, which we just talked about as being defined. Any declaration must include the description of the emergency or disaster, the date it's coming into effect, the duration it will be in effect. So let's say it's from May 1st to May 31st. That will be the declaration of the emergency. What areas within Kanesatake that will be affected or implemented in this piece, as well as any contact information of who to contact if you have questions, who is, leading the answers or leading the charge of the emergency, and any emergency actions that need to be undertaken. Notifications of any state of emergency has to be sent out immediately via the website, email, social media, and posters, so it has to be readily available for community members. Anything you want to add there, Cynthia?
Nope.
Awesome.
And then this is just a list of, what they could do. So they may have to make some rules around travel. Everybody slow their travel down or don't travel in this area. They need to evacuate people and property if there's a noxious substance or something dangerous. What kind of services and supplies need to get out? We all need masks. We all need emergency vehicles. There's boats coming. What kind of spending? Maybe we're going to get funding from the federal government or use some of our own spending to deal with emergencies. Maybe we work with our neighbors to set up shelters and repair services because of some kind of storm. So, and then protecting, of course, the lands, mitigating environmental damage if there are oil drums leaking or if there's some kind of waste that we need to address, then we have to move quickly to do that. So we need this in place just because we really need to, we can't have irreparable harm happening. Chief Brandt?
Yeah, one idea that seems to be, or a concern of people is this law may be abused by council to extend their mandate indefinitely, or beyond the normal mandate and everything. So anything in here or in the other laws preventing that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start and then Saber, you jump in. First of all, the emergency like this are defined at law. We have a lot of case law in Canada that describes what a true emergency is, and it has to be imminent. There's all kinds of legal rules around that. So when we use these words in the definition, it's already defined and the courts understand it properly, that it has to be an emergency, it has to be imminent, it has to be potential to cause harm right now. So nobody could really just kind of make it up to extend their term or use that emergency to extend their term. Now they may extend their term, but it has to be a set duration of 15 days to 30 days or whatever is required. And then frankly, you want people to extend their term. The last thing you want, like right now, we didn't want to lose having a prime minister in Canada while Trump was threatening Canada. So we needed someone there in the interim, even though we were going to an election. So most countries, communities, and nations don't want their leadership just to leave because it's election time, everything stops. If we're in an emergency situation, we need those leaders to stay in place for 15 days, 30 days. But you're right, Chief, to raise that issue. It can't be extended beyond that. As soon as the emergency is over, then the emergency powers are also over. Anything, Saber?
Just to emphasize the importance of the emergency and the disaster definitions. So any of these orders can only be in place as long as that emergency or disaster is in place. So you can't have an indefinite extension of leadership. You can't have an indefinite extension of any other measures. It is really limited to whatever term that emergency or disaster is. And that is, reviewable. Let's say there is an oil spill and you go, okay, we're going to implement an emergency order and emergency measures for 15 days because it's only going to take 15 days for us to clean it up. And then 12 days go by and turns out it takes another 10 days to finish that cleanup. So you're able to extend it until that emergency or disaster is then completed or over or has ended, and the emergency order then ends as well.
And all of this is going to be interpreted by any ethics commission or court or arbitrator to have to align with the ethics commission. So it would be unethical for someone to use an emergency measure if it's not in the best, as a power to continue, if it's not in the best interests of all of the community, not just part of the community, but all of the community. So those things work together. That's why you have an ethics code as well as a trespass law, an ethics code as well as emergency laws and land protection laws.
I think that's such a great flag, Cynthia, just to raise that, this is the importance of having a code of ethics, is to ensure that elected leadership is bound by an ethical standard. And then when the laws come in place underneath it, they're bound to uphold the laws according to the best interest of the community and community members. And if they're not doing that, let's say they tried to extend it indefinitely, then they are able to answer to the independent ethics commission to hold them accountable according to the code and according to the code of ethics. So there's definitely mechanisms in here. These laws really work together, and they've been designed to do so.
Okay.
think that takes us to offense.
Yeah, I think we did that already. Oh no, we didn't. We didn't do that. There's a one
the
right
ending.
before it that is
Yeah.
how to end the emergency, and that ends when MCK has to pass a resolution as well. They had to pass a resolution to start it if they could get that out the door, and then also to end it, and then all emergency actions cease at that point.
Yeah, and under this section, it is section 6 of the law. If you have it open in front of you, it does state that it's either by resolution or the emergency or disaster has ended. So both of those things happen, and those emergency measures or orders end.
Mm-hmm. And again, these are the offenses. The next slide talks about the same thing, up to $5,000 fine and 2 years less a day. Now, just so you know, these laws also can work in conjunction with provincial or federal laws as well. Because these are your laws, they would take precedence if there was a conflict. But we've looked at the other laws to make sure that there's probably not a conflict and they can all work well together. So there'll be other emergency laws that will apply. Might be a declaration of emergency status by the province if there was ever another pandemic, for example. Okay, so then summary of emergency powers, it gives you a rapid response. It has to be made to protect people, property, and lands, and it has to be used responsibly. The authority has to use that power responsibly. Questions or comments on that before we go to the last one, which is land protection? This last one, we've done these together because they're a bit of a suite that can work well together, all to deal with the urgent protection of lands. Because once you harm lands irreparably, it takes years, of course, to remediate and repair. So these are the most important. And if you have your lands and your waters protected, then the people tend to be safe and protected as well on their lands and waters. So to protect the environment and natural resources, this one deals with pollution and contaminants that can really cause harm. And again, all of these definitions come from us working together and scouring all of the various laws across the country, all of the various First Nation governance laws. I work up in the north doing Dene and Inuit laws in the past. And so these are all definitions that we think are hopefully clear enough and the best definitions that we could find. So contaminant and pollution is defined this way in several other laws as well. This will work well with those other laws. Anything that harms the environment or the whole ecosystem, not just one little piece of it, but how it works together, the ecosystem. Anything that interferes with the use and enjoyment of your lands, causes injury to your environment, or again, the whole system, which of course adversely affects your health, safety, and welfare. Any kind of dumping of any waste, garbage, and this is I'm going to go back and look at your anti-dumping moratorium to make sure. I think we looked, it's ringing a bell now. I'm sure we looked at that language when we created this. Any dumping, spilling, releasing substances, liquid or gas, anything that smells. You get the idea. So the key definitions in this one are really talking about the interconnected systems. We were told by leadership and by some of the elders on the council even that it has to be interconnected and it has to deal with all of the living systems, including rocks, trees, all of the vision. So habitat is a very important word in this law that was created, as well as naming the resources of soil, water, minerals, plants, and others. Anything to say there, Saber? No. Okay. So prohibited activities, it's unlawful. So it's not allowed, prohibited to introduce pollutants or contaminants and to damage the system, to damage the habitat, because that's a damage of your Section 35 rights to lands and resources and to have them for substance and ceremonial health and wellness. Now, MCK can issue permits for certain restricted activities, and they can apply conditions. So the way that they can do that is say, you can use this particular soil for this particular purpose, but you have to mitigate that harm by at the end of this project, you have to replace that soil, or you have to have it measured and tested. So that gives us a chance to make sure that if there is any harm that we can't predict, if it comes about, we can mitigate it, we can repair it, and we can impose those conditions. So if someone has a condition that they are supposed to measure the water, measure the soils, and return it to its same condition, and then they violate that, then they lose their permit. Their permit gets revoked. And you want to do this one, Saber? Complaints and investigations?
Sure, yeah, complaints and investigations. So we wanted to ensure that there was a mechanism for community members, even anonymously, to submit a complaint if you think you know someone that's violating the pollution or the dumping or causing harm to the land, that you're able to submit a complaint to the MCK. It can be done anonymously, but it must include the suspect's information, like name and address. It must include a description of the activity as well as the location of the activity. So let's say, they live in one spot, but they're, dumping toxic waste by the river. We would need all that information in the complaint that's submitted. And then any officers, like peace officers or an authorized authority, may be able to collect samples or evidence or witness statements. So an MCK receives that complaint, and then someone is appointed to collect that evidence. And then upon receipt of the evidence, the MCK then has to determine whether there was an offense under Section 4, which is what's been prohibited.
Okay. And then this slide is now looking a little bit familiar to you, because again, these all work together, and they have to work with the laws of our neighbors as well. And then again, each day of the violation could be a new offense, so people can't just ignore, because the penalties get piled on each other. And it commits us to governance, to governing and stewarding these lands. And it really looks at long-term protection. This is the one that's about the next 7 generations. It's not about tomorrow only. And then the next one, go ahead. Michelle has a little question.
Yeah, can you go back to the other slide? You said heard in the Quebec courts.
Yeah, so we have to decide what we want to do about the courts. Right now, you just have Quebec courts, Justice of the Peace courts, or the federal courts, or we can get an arbitration process. But we don't have an MCK court yet, but I've been very involved in that, and I would love to create one at some point.
It's just because we are federal land, so what the federal court? Hear those things? How I'm just throwing it out there because I think council is aware of that.
So federal court is an inherent or a jurisdiction that is prescribed by statute. So if you fall under certain rules, like it's something under the Indian Act or a federal law, then it goes to the federal court. But their jurisdiction is very limited. The provincial courts are courts of inherent jurisdiction. They can deal with constitutional issues, Section 35, all of your rights, as well as any environmental harm and damage. So I tend to take environmental cases and laws to the provincial court, because I don't feel like spending money fighting over jurisdiction, whether the federal court has enough jurisdiction to deal with your Section 35 and your Aboriginal rights and title claims and the Indigenous law claims. So I do tend to go to the provincial courts because they're a broad court of inherent jurisdiction, and they have to respect your laws, and they have to respect the Constitution of Canada, and they have to implement UNDRIP. So to me, the federal court is okay for Indian Act offenses, but they're pretty limited.
This is also tied to the Governance Act, or some people know it as KILGA, which does have a provision there around the criminal code and our use of the criminal code around this strict liability offense, which means a summary conviction. And so therefore, under the Quebec court, as defined under the Courts of Justice Act, they have the jurisdiction to hear summary convictions.
Okay, that's an important point. So this kind of law is often a criminal law. And of course, the one thing that Canada wants to have in place across the country is one criminal law applicable. They guard the anti-discrimination laws, Section 15, and the criminal code. Under our kind of stewardship and governance, that's one thing that we don't usually take the jurisdiction up on is criminal laws. And that's because criminal laws can take away your freedom, can put you into prison. So it's really important that it applies equally across to everybody and it's fair. So the criminal jurisdiction is reserved to the Quebec courts and the provincial courts, and it's the criminal code that's applied by those courts. So that environmental harm is often closer to criminal law than other types of offenses like trespass or things like that. So that's an interesting point. All right. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Saber.
Yeah, any other questions before we just move on to some pieces around next steps and all of the laws?
No, those are good questions so far. I've got some homework to
Yeah,
do.
great questions. No, it's really helpful. Any feedback, questions, comments really helps us improve the next version of laws too, so they can serve in the community in the best of their ability. So that's very important. Thank you, everyone. Just before we move into next steps, a couple pieces for all of the laws and the lawmaking process. The laws are repealed, amended, or adopted under the KLMP. Or the lawmaking process, the kanesatake lawmaking process. Some other pieces, language rights are actually respected for any interpretation. So although the laws are currently translated in Kanien'kehá:ka, there is a provision for under all of the laws that if it's not made clear under English that the language it has to be interpreted under is Kanien'kehá:ka. The laws remain valid even if parts of it are invalid. So if it goes to a court on a challenge and a small part of the law is struck down, the other parts still remain in effect. One piece that I did want to clarify is that in the laws it says it's effective upon publication to the MCK website and or the First Nation Gazette. Now that's a technicality. That does not mean these laws can just be published as is to the First Nation Gazette and then therefore they're enforceable. It does just mean that once it's gone through the KLMP, so the lawmaking process, then it comes into effect once it's been published. So a little bit of a technicality. Cynthia, if you want to jump in.
Well, I just saw a really good question that people are asking under our lawmaking process. What is the comment period? How does the comment period work? Kind of like they do in the Gazette. Can you maybe talk about that, Saber?
Yeah, sure. So the comment period, I believe it's a minimum of 30 days for the draft laws that we can accept comments. Now, it does not mean that it's only a minimum of 30 days. So under the code, the Kanesatake code, it outlines that any laws we're putting forward that are going through a community approval process or a community consultation process or an input process, it has to be a minimum of 1 week to a maximum of 4 months. So allegedly comments could be received up to 4 months, but not any further than 4 months. And so the KLMP really does replicate that and honor that in the fact that as long as there are draft laws shared for a minimum of 30 days, so we actually go a little bit past that 1 week minimum and require comments for at least a 30-day period. And then MCK is then able to make a decision whether or not they would like to extend that for an additional round of comments. So for example, the common process under the KLMP would be we share the draft laws for comments for 30 days. We take all those comments back to legal. We update the laws to better represent the needs. And then we reshare a second draft for additional feedback if MCK thinks that's needed, especially if the laws look drastically different. Maybe additional comments might not be needed if they were very small comments, like a capitalization here or an added definition there. Maybe we don't need a second round of feedback, but if the laws have substantively changed, I would assume MCK would want to go through an additional 30-day period of comments. So there's some flexibility around what that looks like.
So yeah, hopefully you guys will be able to take this recorded version and share it with families or share it with work colleagues or wherever you can share it so we get more input and more good questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that ties us nicely into, what does that look like right now? Well, right now that looks like the notice has gone out that we are doing these community input sessions. Some of them are virtual, like this one. This will be recorded. It'll be shared online. We have additional virtual sessions coming up. We also have some workshops coming up. The exact schedule of them to be determined, but there is a link to connect directly with communications on if you would like to attend a workshop, if you would like to have a discussion with us, maybe one-on-one or as a family, as a collective. There are opportunities to do so this week, April 30th into May 1st, possibly. We also have a second virtual communication community information session on Saturday. We recognize that today was the election day, so people are out voting, but hopefully this recording will be beneficial. Please take time, to be critical, to think about these things. We want to ensure that the next draft rounds of laws are serving your needs. So the next session is May 3rd, 5:30 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to join again. You're also welcome to send any comments to the communications email, which I believe we can leave in the chat. It's also available in the notice that was shared. And then after all of these sessions, I believe we have an additional session May 12th. The time is to be confirmed, so I didn't add it to the slide, but May 12th, we'll have a third community information session. That will then mark the 30-day period. We will then, as legal, review all of the comments and questions and feedback into adopting the next version of draft laws. And then MCK will determine whether additional feedback is needed or a community vote is needed, and the process from there as per the KLMP.
So I guess if anything, if I was going to summarize that, I would just say it's very flexible. If people have a lot that they want to say and they share it and we get good feedback back, we will flexibly amend, If we get a few really important comments, but people are not really terribly engaged and don't want a whole bunch of changes, then maybe it's ready to go forward. We've tried to work hard and get these as ready as possible before we even brought them to you. So I'm hoping really that you like them. And then I think we can proceed. So it really just depends. Like the same thing with the workshops. We're offering 2 days of workshops, but if we only have a couple people coming or a few people at a workshop, well, then we'll just do one. If people want 5 workshops, we're ready. So we're really quite open. And that's what council wanted. They wanted a very flexible process and to listen to what people asked for and be ready to provide it. But maybe these laws are good as they are. Maybe people can see how they might benefit them, and maybe we just want to, get them in place. So all to say, we're here to listen, and that's kind of, I think, the end. There's a few little slides there, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump before we open it up to final questions. I'm just gonna jump over to the one feather registration. So this is actually incredibly important, whether it's to do with the laws or the election that will be upcoming in the summer. You'll need to register for one feather for those pieces. There will be online voting available. It's an important tool for keeping community updated. So I'll ask maybe Chief Brandt to just drop that link in the chat. It's a secure platform, so you can go to www.onefeather.ca/nation/kanesatake, and it will prompt you through the registration information.
Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of votes like this recently in the last 2 years, and instead of getting 30% out, we get 80 or 90% out. So I just feel like we're hearing a lot more from people through these both electronic and in-person voting. So I think it's important, and I'm glad that the council has set it up.
Yeah, able to cast a wide net with that, which is great. Yeah, so I'd like to open it up for any final reflections or comments or questions on any of the laws or next steps.
And then maybe I'll ask Chief Brandt if we don't hear too many questions, if you might be able to just give us a few closing remarks, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Yeah, everybody. Um, I know there's a lot of talk like the lawmaking process is very short notice and everything, but really, this is the culmination of, I think, over 2 years at this point, of coming to this point. It's unfortunate that's at the very end of the mandate. It would have been nicer if we had a bit more time, but it's just the nature of how long things take. Um, as displayed and everything through the presentation today, I think people will see that what is being presented isn't haphazardly put together. Like there's a lot behind it. A lot of it is based on currently existing legislation, precedent, and whatnot. It isn't something that we simply hired a firm to come into and they threw together terms. No, this is something done by a professional organization with a history and like deep knowledge in how these work, and where the beneficiaries of this kanesatake are the ones that are going to benefit from this. Everything, once again, looking over personally the land protection law, I'd forgotten just how much was in there and how very necessary it is for the community moving forward. Reading, just seeing it once again is like, yeah, this is why. This is why it was so important to get this done, and it took a long time. But I think people with a good heart, good mind that read through it and everything will see it, that this is really, really important. And other than that, I'd like to thank the ladies. They, without them, this wouldn't have gotten done. We had no idea that it can get done within a single mandate. We truly believe there would be so much red tape from the federal and provincial levels to get laws in place, and having that experience and knowledge goes to show that this is doable.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I hope a few more people see the recording. And thanks for those, for you, Michelle, and everybody who came and asked a few amazing questions. We appreciate it, and have a good night, and take care, you and your families. Thank you.